Electrons. Consider becoming a CISA member if you are just a guest and you're visiting with us today. And finally, just a little bit about the webinar. Thank you to everyone who has called in and joined us online. This is our first time arranging a webinar in Canada, Calgary, hopefully not in Canada. If you're on the webinar, those viewing online will be able to ask the speaker questions, but if you're calling in, we cannot accommodate your questions over the phone. All right, that's it for me. Next up, I just wanted to introduce Tom Jackman. Following 25 years of professional experience in engineering and executive manufacturing positions in the manufacturing high-tech sector, I'm going to add Tom, because we're both high-tech alumnus. Tom holds a research position at State Polytechnic in Calgary, is the president of Simple Solar Heating, vice chair of the Alberta Energy Efficiency Alliance, and holds 4 patents in solar heating technologies. Welcome, Tom. Thanks, Jeff, for that wonderful introduction. So welcome to SAIT, everyone. Most of you know SAIT for all of the academic training programs. There's over 35 apprenticeships and 86 other programs from short-term diplomas right through to degree programs. But many people don't also know that SAIT's one of Canada's top research colleges. And we're doing a lot of fabrication and testing and environmental studies, and more recently into unmanned vehicles, and the Green Building Technologies Group. So in total, we're doing over $10 million a year in applied research at SAIT, and there's almost 100 researchers involved at different times. In Green Building Technologies, which is the group that I work with, we do energy efficient building design, building integrated renewable energy, which is really where all the solar falls under, architectural ecology, materials and advanced assemblies, and a really neat piece is the energy measuring and monitoring, which really feeds back to the renewable energy piece. Some of our clients in solar that I've been working with the last few years, there's a list of names here. You'll recognize some big corporations, and there's also, you won't recognize others that are much smaller. And we are pleased to be moving into our new GPTAC lab. You see it over here at the corner of 14th Street and 16th Avenue. So it's our brand new building. Some of you may have already toured it. It's actually a passive house construction, and it's just full of all kinds of neat features for, you know, us guys in energy efficient design. We are actually having another open house on Monday, just a few days from now. So if you want to drop by, there's a picture of it from the inside. So in addition, SAIT does offer some solar PV courses. The ELEC 142 is the more general one, and the ELEC 144 is for electricians. And they've been running this fall, but they're booked up, and they're scheduled again in the new year. So if you're looking at getting a little more formal, then there's SAIT courses for that. So there's my coordinates, if you want to get hold of me. And we also tonight want to thank our sponsors for tonight's event, which is HES TV and KCP Energy. So thank you very much for your contributions. Without the sponsorships, it'd be very difficult to put these seminars on, and as you know, there's no charge for the seminars, and that's the format that we're hoping to continue with. So any other companies that might be interested in raising their profile in the fast-growing solar industry, as Jeff said, think about becoming active with CISA and sponsoring. So our first speaker is a special guest, is Dr. Joe Vipond. And Joe has worked as an emergency physician for 17 years, currently at the Foothills Medical Center and Peter Logie Hospital. He has been an avid community stakeholder and organizer throughout his life. Recently, his interest has turned back to the environment, and in 2015, he completed his term on the CPAWS Southern Alberta Board of Directors. Currently, he is a board member of the Alberta Wilderness Association, and this is where I know him more from. He's a spokesperson for the Alberta Coal Phase-Out Movement and the Canadian Coal Phase-Out Network. Joe grew up in Calgary and lived with his amazing wife and 2 daughters. Thank you, Joe.
So it's finally here. We finally have energy or solar incentive programs that will allow you to become not just users of energy, but producers of energy. It's the democratization of our energy systems. So let's rejoice. Let the socialists rejoice. Let the libertarians rejoice. Let the Green Tea Partiers rejoice. This is really something that goes across the whole spectrum and all politicals can support. Pretty exciting things. I was an early adopter. I got my system in November 2012, so it's been going for almost 5 years now. It's a 3 kilowatt system, and it produces about 3,000 kilowatt hours a year, which makes me electricity carbon neutral, because I've got a pretty efficient house. In total, I've produced 15.8 megawatt hours, which is just incredible for me to say the words megawatt hours and put that number in front of it. It's fascinating. And I can't wait to expand as I push everything on in my garage to allow for me to charge my as yet to be bought electric car. So one of the amazing things about solar energy is that it goes viral. So I've got my system. Now we have a total of 3 systems on my street. I can't tell you the number of times where colleagues or neighbors or friends have come up to me and asked me about my system. What's the finances like? How much did it cost? Who did the install? Why did you even bother? And this stuff just is contagious. It just grows. And of course, everything is much cheaper now than when I installed my 2012 system. So the solar panels are cheaper, the systems are more energy efficient, and of course we've got these great solar incentive programs, which of course is why you're here. Let me end with this. Amidst the celebration, the fun of solar, the great apps that go along with this, let's not forget why this matters. Climate change is here, and it's getting worse. Alberta still produced 65% of all of its electricity, of its grid electricity in 2016 from coal. 65%. That means everybody here who doesn't have a solar system is burning about 40 pounds of coal a day. 40 pounds of coal that produces emissions that kill people. 40 pounds of coal that's destroying our climate. Coal is carbon-based. CO2 emissions. It's carbon dioxide is pretty. It's the dirtiest of the fossil fuels. Right? I'm sorry, I don't understand your question, but maybe we can talk about it afterwards. I'd be happy to discuss that. So this coal is killing people, and it's destroying the planet. The sooner it's gone, the better. And you, by investing in a solar system, are investing in a safe climate future. For yourself, for your kids. You're not going to find any better return on your investments in any stock market. So let's hear about how we can get into solar. Let's hear how we can safeguard our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I would now like to introduce Brianna Eggie. Brianna is a policy advisor in the Climate Change Policy Branch of the Alberta Climate Change Office. She is working on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and related policies. She previously worked in the uranium and potash industries in Saskatchewan, as well as Environment Canada and Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada. Please join me in welcoming Brianna.
It's a little high for me, apologies. Thank you again for joining us on this blustery evening. I'm going to introduce our first speaker here, Jesse Rowe. Jesse Rowe is currently the Vice President of Corporate Performance at Energy Efficiency Alberta. So the Corporate Performance Business Unit is responsible for portfolio planning, program evaluation, and policy engagement across Alberta. Prior to joining EEA, as many of you likely know, Jesse spent 10 years running the Alberta Energy Efficiency Alliance, which is an industry group advocating for new energy efficiency policies and programs, and was a member of the province's Energy Efficiency Advisory Panel. Jesse has also provided consulting services to municipalities, First Nations, and companies in the areas of community energy planning, technology evaluation, and life cycle assessment. Jesse completed a mechanical engineering degree at the University of Alberta and is a registered professional engineer in the province. Give it up for Jesse Rowe.
Thank you very much, Brianna. I'm going to raise the microphone back up a little bit. It's a good thing we figured out how to put this PDF on full screen before we started. We'll just do that for everyone here. Here we go. All right, so as Brianna mentioned, I'm from Energy Efficiency Alberta. I've been there for a couple of months at this point, so all of us are relatively new. Brianna has actually been participating with the organization even longer than I have. A lot of our programs were started up by the Climate Change Office within the Government of Alberta, but they're now being transitioned over to this organization, which is separate from the government, but as many of you know, the funding for these programs is coming from the provincial government at this point. So I'm here to talk about the residential and commercial solar program, which is the largest of the solar programs that we have in the province. So I'm going to be providing a high-level overview of them, but we also have Brianna, who's actually the program manager for those programs here, and Kevin Quilliam, who's actually is from the company that administers the programs, to answer any questions that you have in a detailed way. I think we're taking questions after all of the presentations. I think, I'm not sure if that was mentioned yet, but if you've got questions for when we do the Q&A at the end of all the presentations, then certainly those folks are going to be able to help you out with a lot of the details. I'll just be here to give you some of the high-level context in which we're working in these days. So the residential and commercial solar program has its roots in the Climate Leadership Plan that was released by the province in late 2015. It's about 2 years ago at this point. And then it was followed up by the Energy Efficiency Advisory Panel, which I was a part of, and that wrapped up in late 2016. One of the things I was talking about to folks before the session started here was how long does it usually take for these programs to get up and running? And I said, well, in jurisdictions that have been doing this for a while, it usually take about 18 months to go from, hey, we'd like to do a new program, to that program actually launching. So here in Alberta, we did that in about half the time. But without really the capacity in place that those other jurisdictions have, we had to build that at the same time. So I think it's quite astounding, the place that we're at right now. But for Energy Efficiency Alberta, we certainly don't want to stop here. We have an intention of growing the number of programs that we have in the marketplace and doing more in all of the sectors out there, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial. So I think those are important kind of context to think about when we're talking about the programs today. So both those processes that I mentioned before, they actually talked about solar energy as something that we should be doing to reduce emissions, to create jobs in the province, to help people reduce their power bills, and to create an industry within the province and support the creation of that industry. All right, so there's $36 million in rebates for these the programs that I'm talking about here, the residential and commercial solar program. This provides a prescriptive fixed rebate amount of about it's exactly 75 cents per watt for solar PV systems. And that's available to homeowners, businesses, and nonprofits. One of the overarching questions that is received when we're talking to people about this funding is whether or not the funding is running out. We've had a history in this program of programs that were funded and then they were fully subscribed very quickly, and there was no room left for people to participate. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, in terms of the number of systems that we actually want to get installed through this program, It isn't the case that we're running out of room. There's actually a lot of growth that needs to happen in order to meet the targets of these programs. So please, I would encourage you, if you're interested in the system, to get involved in the application process. And yes, there's plenty of room at this point for lots of people to get involved. As far as the process goes, this is a high-level map of what the process looks like. Not sure if everyone can see that, but I'll walk you through it. The first set of arrows, the big arrows on the top left there, are really about deciding which program you should apply to. We're going to be hearing about other programs this evening that can be applicable to Indigenous communities, the municipal sector, and the agriculture sector. And so if you're fall into one of those categories, it's really important to try and determine which of the programs is the right one to be applying for. So taking a look at those different programs, and even calling us and finding out which program is best for you is a good way to go on that. The next step, if you're going to be getting involved in our program, the residential and commercial one, is to file a Part 1 application. And so when you file that Part 1 application, we can actually give a response to you in terms of, yes, this is a system that's eligible. So you can then move forward with your installation with the confidence that it is eligible for the incentive that you're trying to go for. And so once you've heard back in terms of the eligibility of your system, you then go into the process here, the box at the bottom right, which is about installing your system. And then once the system is installed, you can then do Part 2 of the application, which is actually applying for the rebate now that you have proof that your system is installed. So the solar program has been in the market for about 4 months, and this is a little bit on what we've seen in that time frame. So it was about 48 hours after after the official launch, when we had 100 Albertans already signed up to participate in the program. So we can see there was definitely a pent-up demand that we were responding to in the marketplace. Within the first week, over 40 applications had already received their Part 1 application verification. So right at the very start of the program, there was a very good turnaround in terms of getting that response back on the Part 1 applications, and that's still the case, a very good turnaround time. And then we've seen a steady stream of applications coming in, on average about 20 per week at this point. And we've seen a lot of rebates go out as well at this point. So as of October 15th, we've had over 400 applications that have been received and have been reviewed and verified. And this amounts to nearly $5 million in rebates, or over 6 megawatts that have been identified within that intake process. So over 160 systems at this point have been fully built, and their applications have been processed and rebates have been received. When the residential and commercial solar program launched, there were some other programs in the province at that time, and we'll be hearing about them today. The results of these programs indicated there was a robust interest in energy efficiency, or solar photovoltaic interest in the province, and so this program that we've launched more recently is really trying to add to that in terms of responding to that interest. There's actually also another program which we didn't list up here, and it's through the Ministry of Education. It's called Solar for Schools, and that program was announced in October of last year, and it provides funding for I think it's 36 PV systems within Alberta schools. Another little stat here for interest is, according to the Alberta Electric System Operator, as of August of this year, there were 1,870 photovoltaic systems installed in the province, which equates to over 18.5 megawatts of power. One of the key steps in working towards achieving the program goals and objectives I talked about is to build relationships and partnerships across the province and across the country. This includes provincial and national organizations like the Solar Energy Society of Alberta and CANSIA, but more importantly, the local renewable energy services industry itself. As the install season winds down for the year, we will be ramping up our outreach efforts to connect with those in the industry to get feedback on the program, to understand what works and what doesn't, to learn where the gaps are, including barriers and opportunities, and to simply develop more open and frequent communication channels between the program administrators and program participants. So where do we go from here? We've got a program in market. It's been designed to run for 3 years, but there's certainly more when it comes to the solar energy side of things. that we want to be thinking about in terms of the future of programming and moving this forward. So from Energy Efficiency Alberta's perspective, we've already heard feedback on what we could be doing more of. We've heard ideas like including solar thermal systems within the program, off-grid systems, and integrated battery storage. These are all ideas that we'll be taking into account when we look at how do we evolve these programs over time, how do we add to programs, and certainly we'll be engaging with stakeholders to try and hear even more ideas on what we could be doing differently as we move forward. The other piece that's really important to take into account is what's shown up here on the graphic, which are all the different moving pieces right now within our electricity system within Alberta. So it's not just about our solar programs, but there's a huge amount of work going on right now in terms of things like a capacity market. It's a different form of market for our electricity system that could potentially impact and benefit systems like this. There's also a regulatory system that defines how you can connect as a small energy system and how you're compensated. And those are all conversations that are being led by Alberta Energy primarily. And Energy Efficiency Alberta fits into those conversations as a stakeholder similar to lots of folks in the industry. And so we certainly look forward to working with the industry and engaging in those conversations to see how we can build up additional institutional supports for solar in the province over time. So that's it for me. As I said before, I'll be among the panel members, and we've got Kevin, who actually is running the programs these days, that will be here to answer questions as well. But I look forward to hearing any questions that you got, and thank you very much for having us this evening.
Thank you, Jesse. So our next speaker is from the Alberta Municipal Solar Program, delivered through the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre. It's Mark Hewitt. He's dialing in remotely, so hopefully he is on the line and ready. I'm going to look over at my IT people there. Pardon me? Oh, I see. Okay, sounds good. Yep. Am I dialing Mark, or is Mark dialing us? Okay. Hi, Mark. Am I holding him up to the speaker?
Well, he can hear you now.
Hi, Mark. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Can they hear me?
This is as loud as the phone goes.
You still there? Are you there?
Yep.
Just a second.
As that's going on, I'll introduce Mark Hewitt. He's the manager of the MCCAC. He joined the organization in May 2015, where he's contributed to the management, design, and implementation of
Yeah, we can hear you now.
multiple energy efficiency and renewable energy programs for municipalities and nonprofit organizations across the province. Mark previously worked with the Government of Alberta as a senior policy advisor and a climate change engineer in the Air and Climate Change Policy Branch. Mark is a professional engineer and holds a Master of Science and a Bachelor of Science degrees in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Alberta. Mark, take it away.
Perfect. So I guess we'll just say next slide and things go on.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you everybody for bearing with me as we try to do this remotely from Edmonton. I was a little worried about the technology, but it seems like everything is going. So, as Brandon said, I'm here to talk about the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre and the solar program. Maybe if you can jump to the next slide. Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. Next again. So before I jump into the details of our program, sorry, there's a little more time over here. That's actually a video. I'm not even going to attempt to show the video remotely over everything, so maybe you just get that into the next slide as well. And there is a really great YouTube video that was done on our program on one of the projects. If you're interested in this, let me know and I can share it. But before we get into this, I wanted to give a quick overview of the NCAC for those of you who aren't familiar. So what I'm saying is joint initiative between the two representative organizations and municipalities in Alberta. The AUMA represents urban municipalities, and the AUMC represents rural municipalities, as well as the Alberta Environment and Parks through the Climate Change Office and the Municipal Affairs. So the four organizations got together in a partnership to form the NCAC to give capacity support to municipalities to help them address climate change. We do this in a variety of ways through education and technical support on actual projects. We also really get hands-on support and financial support through our funding program. One of which is our solar program. And in relation to our solar program, we are funded by the government of Alberta, but we also have some energy efficiency and energy audit programs, some of which are now funded by energy efficiency in Alberta. We've been operating since around 2009, but I've really grown in the past couple of years with expanded budgets and a lot more programming. Next slide, please. So today I wanted to talk about the Alberta Municipal Solar Program. As I mentioned, it's one of the suite of programs that have been out of the province in the past. We launched in spring of 2016, so we're just coming up on around a year and a half having it out. The MSP was a $5 million solar program funded by the government of Alberta. It's eligible for municipalities and community-related nonprofit organizations that are part of sort of the municipal network. Like the other programs that we discussed today, it is focused on grid-connected, microgeneration compliant projects. So we're really looking at getting either rooftop-mounted or ground-mounted solar PV out of the municipalities. This program was one of the earlier ones launched, and it really gave a great opportunity for municipalities to demonstrate some solar leadership across the province. The solar industry, obviously, the amount of total power capacity has grown tremendously since we launched this program. So we used to brag at the time about being able to double the size of the sector, but it's actually tripled or more since we launched the program. So we're very excited to be a part of it, and still going forward with more funding available. If you go to the next slide, please. One of the areas for our program is a little bit different from some of the other programs in the province to date, is that our rebate level is scaled based on the size of the solar PV system. We did this really to try to accommodate the fact that there are some economies of scale, not necessarily a huge difference, but we really wanted to enable smaller municipalities, towns, and counties to have just as much access to the rebate and the funding as with the larger ones, you see the three different scales. So we actually have, we originally had 3 scales, and then the microgen regulation changed. We added a 4th category called megawatts. The basic rebates range from 90 cents per watt up to 55 cents per watt for the largest systems, and then the global maximum of 25% ineligible expenses across all 4 categories. So most of our systems do fall in the medium scale, in which case they're receiving a very similar rebate structure as what the commercial side of the residential commercial solar program would have as well. Next slide, please. We wanted to give a bit of a sense of the participation to date, so I've thrown together a couple of charts so that there are through them and promise not to have too many cracks. But this is a chart showing a breakdown of our participation by municipality type. So to date, we've got a total of 36 projects. Obviously, a much smaller number than some of the other programs. That's in part because our funding is slower, but we also have, on average, probably larger project sizes going forward. As you can see here, the smaller towns and municipal districts and counties actually have quite a large number of participating projects. The cities take in a bit of a smaller portion. But when it comes to the actual capacity of megawatts of solar PV installed, which are now hitting around 4 megawatts, the majority is affected in cities. So we're seeing a fewer number of much larger projects going forward in cities, and greater level of participation, but mostly smaller systems, probably as expected in the municipal district, counties, and towns. Next slide, please. This next bar graph kind of shows a very similar story. So you can see that typically the most common installation types that we're getting are between 20 and 60 kilowatts. Wind farm is probably quite large, up to 1.12 megawatts per day. But we also are seeing quite a big surge uptick in the 100 to 300 kilowatt systems lately. We think that this solar come on is due to the time it takes to get the project going for municipalities to get budget approval. Next slide, please. To give you a few specific examples, the program has been successful in getting project participation from all across the province. So we have some from as far as south as Lethbridge, and far north as northern Sunrise County, which is near Peace River. So we are a truly expanding province. But some examples are, so for example, the Riverdale community used to be everything is really interesting solar diesel. You can see on the top left. We've had quite a bit of participation from the city of Calgary, so we've got an image there of a 36 kilowatt installation on the Manchester building. The total Valley actually did a couple of low-income housing, so a total of 38 kilowatt systems there. And they're quite happy with the projects, and they're now actually following up with a few other buildings as well. And finally, Hill County there in the bottom right is another 32 kilowatt system that's being installed. We have a website where we try to showcase and put up pictures and project information for all of our participants. So if you're interested in seeing more of our projects, just visit the UCCAC's website and click on Project Showcase. Next slide. So as the slide says here, we are still open. We have just under half of our funding remaining. This is perfect, we're right on track. That's where we were expected to be. So we definitely want everyone to know that we are still accepting new applications. At present, we'll be accepting them until April 30th. And that will enable us to wrap up the project on time with our current commitments. So those that are interested, the application process is quite simple. They can start by submitting an expression of interest, which is available on our website under the AMSP program. Just the link off to the right. Next slide, please. Before we leave today, I just want to let everyone know as well about a very new tool that we just developed in partnership with the Chemical Institute and the Solar Energy Society of Alberta that was funded by the Alberta Economic Trade and Development. And that's a solar-friendly municipality toolkit. It's a series of documents and a solar calculator that walks through the basics of solar PV and how municipalities are depending in general to go about installing the system, some of the basics about the technology, the payback. But then there's also documents on how municipalities can be leaders and engage their community members on the benefits of solar by demonstrating projects themselves or by hosting community programs. Finally, it has a whole section on permitting, recognizing that municipalities really govern the permit process the residential applicants have to go forward through. And so part of putting out this guide was to enable municipalities to be solar leaders by really implementing permitting practices that are best in class and really try to speed through and make as easy as possible the application process for residential and commercial participants. So we kind of encourage anyone, particularly in areas where the permitting process is quite challenging, to refer to this guide and to try to have some of the best in class practice measures implemented. So the next slide. Obviously, for the reasons of calling for the phone, I don't have good access to hearing the questions. So as far as I understand, I won't be around for the question and answer period. So my contact information is up here. So you can send me an email to contact@nccac.ca, We would be very happy to help answer any questions from the presentation or anything else you have about our program. And with that, I want to thank you so much for listening, and hopefully I came through loud enough for everybody here, because I really can't tell.
You're excellent, Mark.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much to Mark Hewitt for calling in. Apologies for my technical non-capabilities at the beginning there. So our next presentation is by Cal Scarf as part of the Growing Forward On-Farm Energy Management Program. She works at the Gateway Research Organization. She works with the provincial government to promote the on-farm energy management and on-farm solar PV programs as part of Growing Forward 2. She grew up on a farm south of Owen, Alberta, and now works out of Westlock, Alberta. She's a recent graduate of the University of Alberta with a degree in Environmental and Conservation Sciences.
Thank you. All right, first off, is there anyone here that is involved in the agriculture industry? All right, not very many. That's all right. There's a few differences with this program because it is geared towards agriculture, and it's a part of the Growing Forward 2 program. So Growing Forward 2 is a federal, provincial, and territorial partnership with a mandate to drive an innovative, competitive, and profitable Canadian agriculture and agri-food sector. So it's a big funding program that's funded federally and not just provincially. And it's been going on. Growing Forward 1 went from 2008 to 2013, and Growing Forward 2 is going from 2013 to 2018. So it's been going on for a lot longer than a lot of these other funding programs, and it's getting funding on a larger scale because it has that federal aspect. Now, that being said, because it has funding from the federal government, it is being run provincially. So all of the provinces and territories have a Growing Forward program, but they all run them a little bit differently so it can suit that province's needs. So the solar program and the on-farm energy management program are just 2 out of 28 programs that Alberta has under Growing Forward 2. So that's why some of the things are a little bit different, just because it's part of a bigger and older program than a lot of these other funding programs. So the PV program is specific to farms, and the goal is to reduce the use of fossil fuels and carbon emissions in the agriculture industry. 2 important goals as part of that: to improve environmental stewardship. Agriculture is a great industry. They live off the environment. They know how important it is to keep the land clean and keep everything running easy. So this is a part of that bigger picture of agriculture. If we keep our environment clean, the agriculture industry is happier for longer. And then to improve energy management. I was talking to someone about this earlier. If you think crop production, out in the field, maybe your energy use isn't that much, but once you start thinking about your intensive livestock, poultry, dairy, swine, and even potatoes and root vegetables that you have to keep ventilated and have to keep at a certain temperature, it becomes pretty energy intensive. So this program, this PV program, goes hand in hand with the on-farm energy management program to improve the overall look of energy use in the agriculture industry. The requirements under the Growing Forward program, the on-farm energy and on-farm PV, it has to be installed on a site ID that has a distribution rate class of farm or something related to agriculture. So they have aligned it so that it matches quite well with the residential programs that are in Alberta. And so the funding rates are the same, and this is how they have distinguished between which program you find yourself under. So it's based on what your distribution rate class is. And so you find that out by talking to your retailer. So every site ID has a rate class attached to it, and it will just determine some of the fees that go along with that. And so this is really key because some people who are living on an acreage who aren't agriculture producers, they might have an agriculture site ID because that site ID might have been set up before it was an acreage. There might have been a farm at one point. And so this is something that we're really emphasizing, is that everyone should double check their site ID before they go forward in a program, just to be sure that they're applying to the right program. The next thing has to be grid tied, which is on par with all the other funding programs. Approved under Alberta's microgen legislation. It's again in line with all the others mainly. Positioned to optimize sunshine and minimizing shading, so that makes sense. They don't want to fund anything that's going to be facing north and not actually producing energy. And there have to be manufacturer warranties on the modules for 20 years, and the inverters have to be have warranties up to 10 years. No retroactive projects will be accepted, so this is again why it's really important to check your site ID, because before any work has been done on this project, the application needs to be sent in. And that's a little bit different than some of the residential and some of the other programs where you can send in after all the work's been done. This one, the application goes in before any work starts. And then the funding rate is very similar. It's 75 cents per watt up to 35% of the eligible cost for the first 100 kilowatts. And then anything over and above that is 56 cents per watt up to 27% of eligible costs. The average that they've seen installed into this program since it opened reopened in July. So it has been running since 2013. And then in July, it closed and reopened with different funding rates that matched up with the residential programs. So now these are the new funding rates. So since that opening in July, I think the average size that they've been seeing is 42 kilowatts. So again, it makes sense to do a separate program for agriculture because they have different energy demands, higher energy demands, and will be installing a larger system than what you'd see in a residential. A application is found online at growingforward.alberta.ca. An important thing if you're going through the application process, to be sure that the application, the name that you have written down on the application matches the name that's on all of your invoices and all of your receipts. So they make sure that they're sending the right money, the money to the person who has actually done the work. They have to be submitted by mail, and the requirements for the application, so you have the form that's filled out, the microgen approval, quotes from your contractor. It does have to be contractor installed under this program. 1 month's electrical bill current within the last 2 years. That's just so they can confirm your site ID and your rate costs and that kind of thing. So it doesn't matter what month it's from, it just has to be a current bill. And then written confirmation of your distribution rate class. Again, because that's the key, that's what distinguishes this program for others, is that is for agriculture site IDs. So if it's not written on your electrical bill, you need to get a letter or an email from your retailer that confirms that. So that's just a really quick rundown. There's not a lot of agricultural producers in here, but maybe some installers, that information would be useful. So if there's any questions, you can save them for the panel afterwards, and I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Kale. You never know, there's maybe a lot of agriculture producers on the webinar tonight, remotely. And last but not least, Dwayne Leminski. He's part of the Alberta Indigenous Solar Program. So Dwayne has enjoyed a 22-year career in multiple levels of government. He's worked with Canada Revenue Agency as well as Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada before transitioning to his current role in municipal affairs with the Alberta government. He's working as a policy advisor with municipal grants, and his current role is the team lead for the climate leadership, with Indigenous relations.
Let's just make sure I got this at the right height. Thanks for that introduction, Brianna. Sorry, excuse me. And please don't hold the Canada Revenue Agency job against me. That was well in my past, just for the record. Moving along, so what I'm here to discuss today is specifically the Alberta Indigenous Solar Program for Indigenous communities and organizations. Why a specific program for Indigenous communities? Leadership in organizations and communities expressed a concern about not having access to the Climate Leadership Plan for grant programs for on-reserve or organization activities. What the Alberta government decided to do was mirror the Municipal Climate Change Centre and develop a program specifically for Indigenous communities and organizations. The funding amount provided reflects the unique circumstances for these organizations and communities. Often, funding is allocated on multiple fronts, and it's very difficult to provide funding for solar panels, so I'll get into the eligibility requirements around this. The objectives, while they're listed there, I'm not going to read them to you. A couple of key takeaways from this is education, to ensure that the right installers and the right systems are put and developed for these organizations and communities, as well as reducing greenhouse emissions, which is the key focus of all of these programs, and a transition to a lower carbon economy, reducing the energy usage and reliance on fossil fuels. Eligible projects, they must be more than 2 kilowatts, but less than 1 megawatt. And that's important because these are maybe grid connected, may not, but they must be less than 1 megawatt. Types of community or organization facilities are eligible: all public facilities, any economic development type of projects such as gas stations or convenience stores, as well as community-owned housing. They also must be compliant with Alberta's microgeneration regulation, which is why it must be less than 1 megawatt. Funding levels are $200,000 per application per community or organization, we fund up to 80% of that, meaning that 20% must come from the organization or community, and it must be non-government of Alberta funds, federal funds, municipal funds, private industry, something of that nature. Eligible expenditures, I'm not going to go through that list, especially since there's many contractors here I suspect tonight who would know this better than I do. The way I look at this is all the expenditures that you need to get this ready to flip the switch and operational are eligible, and they are all listed there, and it's part of the presentation that you can look at later. A shout out to the Solar Association of Alberta. One of our program requirements are that they must be a member of this society to ensure at least that they meet the minimum requirements for solar installation in Alberta. There is our email address for questions that can be directed towards us. And the very bottom link is the actual program guidelines that detail all the eligibility requirements and the paperwork required to apply. We also have another program, which is as listed there, the Green Energy Development Program. It is above 5 megawatts. So the solar panel program I just discussed is up to 1 megawatt. The commercial grade one that we're talking about now is 5 megawatts or larger. The Alberta government is still regulating and sorting out the 1 to 5 megawatt challenge that we're facing, and I'm sure they'll have a solution for that, how to deal with that in terms of a grant funding program, and how to deal with the larger scope of producing energy in that range. The activities funded under this commercial scale program are project development and implementation. So development is, just as it sounds, all the planning around deciding whether or not to produce a large scale amount of energy, and the regulations that need to be jumped through. There was a great chart from Energy Alberta around how many moving pieces there are in the energy market, so it's important to understand what you're getting into, and that's around the development. And we do have a pool of money for implementation, the hard costs associated with developing, for instance, a solar farm. The program guidelines are the link listed right above the picture. That concludes my presentation.
I feel like if Dwayne sat, he'd be at this height. So that concludes the first half of this evening's program. So we're going to take a short 5-minute break before the Q&A and panel session. So feel free to walk around, stretch, kind of mingle, and we'll be back in 5. Thank you.
Oh, my
Are you okay with everything?
Oh, boy. Sorry.
Oh, turn this off.
Yeah, then I could just read them together. Thank you for your technical assistance.
No worries, not a big deal.
So all that's been so far about people who couldn't hear Mark, basically.
Oh.
Because it was hard with it. Just went through too many lines.
Yeah, I guess so.
To get it, but so yeah. So after that, you'll see questions.
Okay.
Or maybe not, but.
Okay. Is this your laptop?
Not really sure whose it is.
Okay.
Do they have coffee outside on this one or not?
I don't think so. I know, I'm fading.
Keys and everything.
I'm fading.
You want to tune in for the panelists?
I am a moderator. So
They'll be sitting down there. They can just use the mics and share around as they want to.
Yep, sure.
I'd say just holding them. You can tell them that.
Okay.
Questions, come to the microphone at home.
Right,
Ask
sounds
questions
good.
and you're good to go.
Cool, thank you.
So far we've been on her own support. Yeah, so Mark was on Lions Committee all of the webinar and everything else. Yeah. We know how many are on there. So we actually have 50 plus people on the webinar. So
Probably. I'd be surprised. Nice. Okay. 58. That was excellent. So if I change that side, I can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. You just gotta see it here.
I just turn it off up here so that they
You don't have to. Yeah.
Because sometimes
Okay, cool.
the webinar people can hear us right now.
Oh. Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
Question for you. I know question period coming up, but on your site there's this webinar, very similar presentation.
Yes.
You guys had a little pamphlet for residential rebate program.
Like the residential retail, the home program.
Yes. Yes.
There may be some up at the front. If there aren't.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I have them in my bag.
I was missing,
Plug in my microphone gas and plug it back in.
Okay, we're going to go on again. Take your seats. Panelists, if you can find your spot there.
Are you going to give Kevin a chance to say a few introductory remarks? He's the only one that hasn't
Oh,
introduced himself.
Yeah, sure. I was going to introduce him, but you can. Hello, welcome back, everyone. So we're going to move on to the panel Q&A session of this evening. So we are joined by previous speakers, Kale, Dwayne, Jesse, as well as Kevin Quilliam. So Kevin Quilliam is with Incline Solution. It's the Canadian subsidiary of Incline, which administers Energy Efficiency Alberta's residential and commercial solar program. In addition to the Alberta program, Kevin administers 7 other solar, renewable, and energy efficiency programs throughout North America. Kevin's also been working with renewable energy programs since 2008, actually co-founding ShrekTech. I say that wrong every time, but it runs renewable energy credit markets before founding Incline, which has a broader renewables and energy efficiency mandate. So if Kevin, I don't even know where Kevin is. Kevin's already speaking. If you like, you can say a few words, just how the program's doing, what your experience has been so far.
Sure, thanks, Brianna. So we administer a number of these programs, and the Alberta program is our latest, and we're pretty excited about it because we have seen a lot of pent-up demand right out of the gate, and we saw in those stats. There's a lot of excitement about the program. We take a lot of calls every day from installers who are interested in it, consumers that are interested in the program. So this has been a lot of fun for us. We're pretty excited about how the program is going so far, and happy to answer your questions. Really happy to get feedback, especially from installers who've been doing this for a while, about ways that we can improve the program, and especially from installers who have just started this, about what kind of questions that you have and how we can help you come into the industry. So please provide that to us either through questions in the public forum, afterwards with me, or give us a call, shoot us an email anytime. We'd like to give your input.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kevin. So for the people in the room here, we do have a mic set up just at the bottom of these stairs over here. So feel free to come up to ask any questions you have. For those on the webinar, thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a good ride. I know there was some audio issues when Mark Hewitt was presenting, but this slide deck will be posted online at Energy Efficiency Alberta's website, as well as the Solar Energy Society of Alberta's website. And we will have a recording as well, so hopefully everyone will be able to hear the audio as well as read the slides. So please, for those on the webinar, feel free to type in your questions into the chat box, and I'll open it up to the floor in the room here. If anyone's going to be the brave first questioner.
If you use the mic, the people on the webinar can hear you. There's actually about almost 60 people on the webinar, so about 90 people on the webinar are here, so thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Early on in your program, I called your helpline about a rural location and blue signs and site IDs. And the lovely lady I was talking to had a similar accent to yourself and was in Annapolis, Maryland, and didn't have a clue what I was talking about. So I was just wondering, do you have any Canadian people on the helpline?
We don't, but we'd like to be educated by you. So certainly, I think I remember talking to Sally about having talked to you and what we learned. So we have some pretty regular huddles where we talk about rather prosaic but important things like exactly what you're talking about. so be assured that those are actually, we have a feedback loop where, we didn't know that this is how it was done. Now we all do. So
okay, well, just you might have noticed I don't have a Canadian accent either, but I thought I was calling the Alberta Energy Efficiency Program, and getting an American on the other end of the line was somewhat disconcerting, and it was somewhat surprising. Only the Alberta Energy Efficiency Program. So maybe someone else would like to address that? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll let Brianna talk, or Jesse do that.
Yeah, I can say a few words about that. That's something we've heard about other programs as well, is in terms of contracting, who's going to deliver these programs. It was an open competition, so everybody was able to participate in that. And when it comes down to competitions like this for Government of Alberta, we actually have trade agreements that require us to open it up. And I actually think as an Albertan, a native Albertan, been here all my life, that's actually a good thing for Alberta. Alberta is an export-oriented economy, so having that type of competition is good for us because we sell a lot of products into other places, and that's where we get our economic strength as a province. And so certainly honoring those trade agreements is very important. So in this case, we had the most competitive bid from the folks here at Incline, and they've been doing a bang-up job for us. There are people who are located in the United States that work on the program. But the vast majority of the employment that is happening for this program are the people in the province that are installing the systems. And that goes for all of the programs that we're running. Energy efficiency and solar are inherently local. You cannot do this from a distance in terms of installation. And so that's really what we're focused on right now. We're focused on building that local industry. And again, it has to be local in terms of the vast majority of it. The other piece that I think is really important for us to recognize when it comes to local benefits is when it comes to a lot of these programs, particularly the one on the energy efficiency side, some of the economic benefits are biggest in terms of the energy that we're saving. So when we save energy, we actually spend it mostly within our local economy on other things, goods and services. And so it can actually help to provide incentives to other parts of the economy. So I know this has been a bit of a sore point for some folks, but I just encourage folks to look at the bigger picture. And there is some very large scale and important and valuable goals that we're trying to accomplish with these programs. And we are actually exceeding our targets at this point. So Albertans have come to these programs even stronger than we were expecting. We knew there was going to be a strong pickup at the start because of the lag in terms of not having these programs previously for a couple of years, but continue to exceed our expectations in terms of these types of programs. But happy to always get the questions and feedback that people have on them as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jesse. So we have two questions through the webinar right now. The first one is there any program for off-grid systems? I'm looking at the panel, and I think the consensus is no.
For Indigenous communities, under my program, the AISP, it does not necessarily need to be grid connected. If I'm catching the gist of that question correctly. So if it's an Aboriginal community, just maybe an organization looking to do an off-grid system, we can certainly accommodate that by submitting an application.
So the question asker has a follow-up. Why aren't there off-grid system incentive programs?
Yeah, I would suggest at this point, the off-grid system is certainly not the majority of the demand that we're going to be seeing in terms of these systems. And so for our program, we're trying to set it up again probably twice as fast as most jurisdictions would do. And so it's really important to try and figure out where can we get the biggest bang for our buck. And so certainly looking at the majority of the marketplace was a good starting point in my opinion. As I mentioned in my talk, we have heard about off-grid systems. So that's something that we can look at as we look at that. And there's a lot of other areas where we don't have programming right now. The industrial sector is a very good example where that's where we have the majority of our energy use in the province. That's a big gap for us as well. Transportation is another area that we may be looking at. So these are all areas that we'll be looking at as we go forward.
Excellent. The second question is, if you sign up for a residential rebate through the residential and commercial solar program, does it preclude you from joining any future programs or a solar co-op? Kevin Quillia, I'm going to look at you.
The program rules for all of our programs, and we coordinate pretty closely between all of our programs. We actually have a site ID database where we're making sure that you're double dipping in multiple programs. And so to the extent that you're putting a system on right now, it can only participate in one program. If there's a future program, it would be up to that program to decide whether they would allow you to participate, having had participated in our program. But how the system is set up right now, you can't participate in the residential commercial program and another provincial program. There is a possibility for you to participate in other potential municipal programs. There's special rules around that. If you are in a situation where you're considering doing that, please give us a call and we'll talk you through the specific situation you're in for that specific municipality or.
Excellent, thank you. There aren't any other questions on the webinar chat. For those who are still online, please ask your questions. I'll open it up again to the floor here. Yes.
Has there ever been any consideration, I'll speak louder so I won't need a speaker, consideration regarding about having enough site production, for example, like folks that are downtown Calgary that would like to become micro-generator, but they can't because they're shaded either by building or trees. The other issue that comes into play is if there was a field someplace, let's say a section, that was loaded up with PV array, that was next to a high density power line. So each one of those homeowners or apartment owners or God knows what could actually own a percentage of that one section, and as they move and they grow, it follows them. Is there any possibility for that? Go ahead.
I'm sure the folks in the webinar heard that one, but I'll summarize it very briefly. You're talking about systems where people can buy into something that's not part of their own thing.
That is correct, sir.
Yeah. So right now it's the microgeneration regulation, which was set up a number of years ago. That's kind of the piece that came in. I'm going to try and position it positively because I think it was very positive when the province brought that in. Because it made it easier for those building mounted systems to go in place. Now when they wrote that, that was kind of the first step for them in making it easier for these systems to connect. They didn't go so far as to do the types of systems that you're talking about in terms of something that isn't building mounted that an individual can buy into. And so I know that there is conversation within the provincial government to start taking those next steps moving forward. They haven't gotten there yet, but I know the conversations are happening. And I certainly hope to see that at some point. Now, I should back up a little bit and say, in terms of buying into a system that's not building mounted, say out in the field or something like that, we sometimes call it distribution connected because it's connected to the distribution grid, not necessarily on a specific site. There's nothing stopping the system from doing that right now. You can do it right now. The only problem is it doesn't have something like the microgeneration regulation, which makes it easier than say what is in place right now. So what's in place right now is say that solar field that you're talking about, it could require just as much regulatory oversight as a brand new massive power plant. And so that's what we're talking about right now. It's not necessarily making it possible, because it is possible. It's about making it easier and making the process to make it happen kind of more reasonable than it is right now. And again, that is a piece that needs to be dealt with from a regulatory perspective, and that's all within the House of Alberta Energy. But I know those conversations are happening, so I'm hopeful that we're going to see more systems like that, because there are groups that are very interested in doing that, and I don't see any reason why not. I think at this point, we're probably more at a state where something's out there yet.
And I agree with you. You have the microphone? Is everybody can hear me?
No, the people online can't hear you.
The webinar folks can't hear you, so.
One of the issues to consider about this is that if you're dealing with a large field, they're going to end up to be going into an auction to sell their kilowatt hour. They're going to get what, 3 cents? Ballpark figure? On the other hand, if they're looking at the micro generation will be at least double that amount or much higher. So what I'm talking about is, let's say somebody that resides into an apartment downtown that has this PV array, part of a large field, and the installation costs would have been much lower than going to actually do it. He would have ended up to have a significant return, and probably would have enjoyed the government 75 cents per watt.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're talking about there is something called net billing. And that's a component of the, trying to make these types of systems work. And so I was talking more about the interconnection, but you're right about the net billing side of it, and then the participation in the program would be something that would come as well. Right now, the participation in the program is really the last piece to come into place. There's really nobody's going to be doing the systems until we get the regulatory and in the example you just described, the billing part of it kind of sorted out. Once those pieces are in place, I can see this type of incentive applying very easily to those types of things. So I do hope that we get there as a province, but there are, we talked about just 3 different pieces, none of them, the first couple aren't necessarily the easiest. They take quite a while to create new regulation, all that kind of stuff, but I'm hopeful we will get there. We had another hand up here.
I was just going to ask if there was a precedent elsewhere for that.
A precedent elsewhere. There are other jurisdictions that do this, and I'm not the expert on all of that. I don't know if anybody on the panel has examples they want to share.
Yeah, and there's certainly places in North America that have programs like that. State of Massachusetts, State of Maryland, State of Delaware, that have, it's called community solar generally, and those, it's a little confusing because community solar can mean a lot of things, but generally community solar means that it's been very difficult to solve the problem that Jesse was just talking about. The utilities are very resistant to the billing system. It was tremendously expensive and difficult for them to set that up, but it has huge promise, and that's not a reason not to do it.
Yeah. And it's part of a larger Alberta energy engagement on community generation as well. So all these questions kind of fall within that community energy generation bucket. That's an active engagement that's ongoing right now, as well as the Alberta Utilities Commission review on distributed generation. So both of those things play into hopefully new policies and regulatory kind of frameworks that will enable these things that you guys are talking about, or kind of make it easier, as Jesse was saying. It is enabled now, it's just a little difficult for those communities and organizations who are interested in doing it.
Well, that's your point there. I'm interested. Wouldn't the benefit of having on your house or your building be that you're not buying it from the grid and not paying the transmission distribution fees, so you're actually getting for less money, whereas if you're doing this cooperative, you're essentially selling it back to the grid at the lower 3 cents per kilowatt hour. I'm just trying to get that. Am I right there?
Yeah, I think those are some of the details that we're looking at. And for the folks in the webinar, the question was really around some of those details in terms of what the economics would look like, the cooperative type system versus the building mounted system, and the reference was to some of the distribution charges and use of the transmission system as well. And so I think you're absolutely right. There are different benefits to those 2 types of systems. I think overall we see for both types of systems, reduced usage of the transmission system. Although I think we all have to recognize if you're connected to the electricity grid, there is a benefit you're receiving from the grid. So I think that's always something that if you're connected, you're going to have to pay at least something for. But in terms of how are you compensating for what you're putting onto the grid or taking off of the grid, what your total load is on the grid in terms of the amount of services it's providing you, and then vice versa. We should also be talking about what kind of services am I offering as having my PV grid back to the grid, because there are definitely benefits to that. In a lot of cases, we might see peak load on the grid happens when the sun is shining, typically. And so if I'm putting on the grid at that point, I'm providing a benefit to that grid. You don't need to build nearly as many power plants in the province to be able to meet that peak. So how am I being compensated as a consumer for that? That's a very sophisticated conversation as far as our electricity system is concerned. I would put us in the Middle Ages when it comes to how we've designed our system. I know in the next couple of decades, it's really going to change. And we're seeing this in other jurisdictions emerging even more than in Alberta here. There's some jurisdictions right now that are really having to tackle how do they deal so much solar penetration on the system that is really taking all of the utilities that are traditionally the big players in the system and throwing their business models on the head in some cases. And how do they make sure they are able to get a return on investment is a huge question that's being raised. Not quite there yet in Alberta, but with the increased penetration of solar and other distributed generation technologies, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, demand response is another technology out there where, as a large load or even a small load as a household, I can be responsive to periods of system stress. I can be providing value back to the grid that way. Those are all very sophisticated conversations that a utility system that was invented about 100 years ago is still trying to wrestle with. So I think we're going to see a lot more of those questions. And the whole, back to your question about, how does it work in terms of, what I'm being compensated. There's a lot of details that are involved in there as well. And again, I think in this product, we need to evolve that conversation so we can get a little bit more clarity for consumers on, not just what am I getting for a co-op system versus a building mounted system in terms of my energy back, the energy I sell to the grid, but also how am I being charged for my distribution and transmission charges as well.
I'm going to take.
Yep, sorry, I just want to clarify one thing because we keep talking about building mounted systems that for our program and the municipal program, it just has to conform with the Alberta microgen regulation, and so we do have ground mounted systems. They just don't have to feed into that site ID that as you saw in the municipal program, there was a gazebo that was ground mounted, so it's possible to do a ground mounted system. When we say building mounted, it's just kind of shorthand for saying that you're under Alberta microgen. It doesn't necessarily actually have to be under the smoke trains. Apologies for using the shorthand.
I'll take a question from our webinar now. Is there any restriction to selling electrons back to the grid, i.e. % of total generation? So I'll answer that super quickly. It is, all these programs are under the microgeneration regulation. So these systems are designed to be self-supply, size to load. So whatever you're selling is essentially excess. I'm not sure if there's anything else to add to that. It's not designed for net export of whatever you're generating back to the grid. Another question is there talk of a feed-in tariff? Dun, dun, dun.
So these days I don't hear much of a talk about feed-in tariff for Alberta. It is a way to provide revenues to a solar system that's different than what we have right now. But at this point, as an organization, Energy Efficiency Alberta has been tasked with providing incentives to solar, small-scale microgeneration and small-scale energy systems. And we've chosen to go the incentive route. It's incentive per kilowatts installed. So the feed-in tariff conversation I know has been going on for years and years in Alberta. I don't think it's really a topic that anyone is focused on right now because we've got this incentive program, but who knows what will happen in the future.
Mm-hmm. And we have a request on the webinar chat. If everyone on the panel, perhaps including myself, could speak up if possible. So the next question is there an over or under supply of contractors and installers in any of the 5 programs?
So I can tell you the residential commercial program, we initially had over 238 installers signed up. A fairly large percentage of that group has actually done at least one installation. So we always would love to have more installers in the program. We'd love to have more participation by the installers who are in the program. I think that we do get homeowners throughout the province, and it may well be that we have 50 installers in Calgary, and that's not going to help the person who's in Medicine Hat. So we always need more solar installers, but we certainly have some pretty broad participation that we're pretty happy with at this point.
For the on-farm solar program, you need, it's not a specific contractor list, it's just a contractor that's approved under the Solar Energy Society of Alberta, so on the CISA webpage. So it's not like we're drawing from a specific pool of these all contractors only, it's just anyone that's a CISA approved contractor.
I would like to take the opportunity to thank CISA and CANCIA for setting up our contractor system, and so there was a little bit of talk about it earlier, but in order to be a qualified contractor to participate in this program, you have to be a member of one of those two organizations, and for CISA have signed the code of ethics that CISA developed through pretty extensive stakeholder engagement with you all, and we definitely very much appreciate the work that they've done, and I think it'll pay dividends for the province going forward as this starts to take off.
So we have another question. I'm not sure if it can be answered right now, but do any power producers buy back extra power for cash back or just a credit? And if it is a credit, what happens to the unused credits?
When it says power producers, are we talking about
retailers?
Folks with PV systems? Can you read again?
Do any power producers, so I would assume retailers, buy back extra power for cash back or just a credit? And if it is a credit, what happens to the unused credits?
I think I know where they're going with that. So I don't know the ins and outs of the microgeneration regulation, but as was stated before, generally set up to not pay for your power, but it's just a reduction on your bill for the power that you're generating. If anybody has any more sophisticated answer than that.
So this person buy back for cash back. It's not necessarily cash back. There are certain organizations or co-ops in Alberta that'll give you like an extra incentive on top of whatever your retail rate is. So for instance, if you're selling the excess to the grid and you get 3.7 cents, you can also get perhaps an extra 1.85 cents from certain, I think there are certain retailers that procure green energy in the province. I think that covers what he's asking. Can anyone disclose roughly how much of the $36 million rebate money has been used to date? Kevin.
We have around $30 million left. So.
Yeah. There are many, many millions left. Oh, yes. Step up to the mic, please.
So in general terms, what are the main challenges for the programs to be? You say that there are a lot of money still available, but what do you think that are the main challenges for the programs to be more, I would say, more spread into different communities? The programs have different orientations, so how can the government be more successful in facing these challenges and overcoming the challenges? That's the first question. The second one is, you said that installers are not really the problem, an issue. So what is, in terms of the supply and demand, the opportunities, or what are the opportunities for the market and for new companies to come to our province and start businesses here?
I can address the second question, that there's lots of opportunity for new businesses in the installation phase, and we've run a number of these programs from inception through a more mature phase to where the program is able to subscribe typically within a pretty short amount of time. a 2-3-year period. And there are solar installers. There's just some of you out here who've been doing this for 10 or 12 or 15 years. So those installers are set up. Their business is taking off. But there are a number of contractors and other trades, roofing, HVAC, electricians, that have some or all of the skills necessary to become solar installers, or the contacts with the with other subs and other contractors that you work with that you can be a solar installer. And so we typically see the original solar installers, they pick up the initial load, and then we get a whole bunch of more solar installers that become solar installers in addition to their other business and the other trades that they were doing. So we really would like to see that here. We've already seen some of that, and I think that's really where the opportunity lies. And this kind of answers your first part of your question too, in that you're the one making the sale. We're providing you an incentive which makes it easier for you to make the sale, but you're the one who knows those customers. If you're an HVAC person, you're the one who's in the customer's house. You're already working with them. You're already familiar with their energy needs. So we're here to help you make the sale. And so to the extent that there's barriers in what we're doing, let us know, because that's what we're depending on you to do, is to make the sale, and then we can enable that. So tell us what we can do to best do that.
Yes.
Oh, for the first part, sorry, I'm just going to answer a little bit about the first part of the question about what barriers might be to have it spread throughout. And just because that's what my role is, specifically, is to promote these programs. And so the people I talk to a lot, it's some misconceptions about some of the complications with solar. They have, oh, it worked because of this, and that's actually not true. Or just some other things that they've heard about it that aren't accurate, that maybe inhibit them. So I think education is a big part of it. The more we get out there and show them that there's these funding programs that make it more financially attainable, and that there's also solutions to any of these problems that might come up to them, might just make it seem less intimidating, I think, is a big part of it.
I agree wholeheartedly with Cal around the education part, but I think a second piece to that is program agility in terms of simplifying processes or simplifying the application process. Sometimes as government we can get a little complicated, and that's where it's important to provide feedback to, I'm sure, all of these programs which will accept feedback and simplify the application process and the reporting process as much as humanly possible.
Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Dave Eggles. Actually, we're one of the sponsors, ATSPB. We're a distributor of solar products, and many of the installers in this room we've been working with way before programs happened in Alberta, way back to when the market was all off-grid. So my question to our panel, thank you for attending, is twofold. First, okay, so we're currently opening a warehouse in Calgary, filling it full of millions of dollars worth of solar products, and we made a smart decision. So your program, your $31 million left rebates, how far out, how many years of a run have you got? And secondly, how election-proof is your program? We know Ontario's government took a big hit over renewables because the opposition blamed renewables for high electrical rates, which is completely bogus. But that was their election platform. And so, the government's very sensitive about their programs. And if the government got out and the Conservatives got into Ontario, they promised they can't, the renewable energy program in Ontario because of that. So, so the second question was, how election-proof is your program? And, how can you sell this to a new government, if that ever happened in Alberta?
I can't speak to the other programs, but Growing Forward 2 has been going on since 2008. And Growing Forward 2 is done next year, but it's going to renew as the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. So it has withstood some changes in government, and it's going to continue on for another 5 years at least after that. So the precedent that Growing Forward has set is that it is election proof, and it is in it for the long haul.
That's fantastic to hear. The program is election proof. My answer to your first question is we have a 3-year program that we're running at this point, the residential and commercial program. So that is what's been committed, and that's our expected run-up for the current round of funding. So that's the $30 million that Kevin had talked about. When it comes to any program that is being initiated by any government, and renewable energy and energy efficiency is the area we work in, yeah, I think we've all seen markets come and go when it comes to something that is government initiated. So I think as a private industry, you'd be foolish not to have a open when it comes to that. Now, in terms of election proofing, I think there's a couple of things that we all need to do as an industry to be able to put us in the best position possible no matter the outcome. I'm not going to try and predict what the outcome of the election is, but I think we know some outcomes that might be business as usual for what we're doing here. There might be a change, a small change, there might be a big change. And I think as an industry, we want to be able to be successful no matter the outcome. So you want to kind of prepare for that. And that's something that is something that Energy Efficiency Alberta is thinking about. And so doing a good job with the programs that we have right now, showing the value of the products and the programs and initiatives that are being undertaken, I think is really extremely important. I think when it comes to elections and political cycles and political winds that blow, there's another way to kind of manage those, and that's getting involved in multiple levels of government. We may see political pendulum swing in this province. They may be swinging differently federally, and so having that engagement at multiple levels of government, or even municipally, we could add in there, it does help with those swings. There's also other items where taking it further away from politics of a province or even a country is also important. That's where some jurisdictions have embedded some of these programs within their utility system. It's actually not the government that's making decisions on these programs on a go-forward basis, it's the regulator. And making the case to the regulator that something like distributed generation is good for the system and reducing system-wide costs for transmission and distribution and can help you meet your peak loads and all of that. Once a regulator is set up to be able to recognize that and value it, and support initiatives that bring those solutions for them forward, then you get further away from political cycles. And I think that's long-term what any program needs to do in any jurisdiction, because there's always the potential that your politics will change, and programs that are exposed to that are vulnerable. So bring it towards the regulator, you get away from these political cycles a little bit. And that's something that I think is a part of, not explicitly part of what's going on right now in the province, but I think there is a definite recognition that our utility system, in the way it's regulated, does need to start considering distributed generation and energy efficiency more formally than it has in the past. And if we're able to get to that place, then again, like I said before, you become a little bit further removed from the political powers that be at the end of the day. So I think there's a lot of strategies that we can be doing as an industry to succeed in a worst case scenario when it comes to the political outcomes, but it's going to take some work to get there, and we've got some time right now to demonstrate what the value we can add and make sure we're institutionalizing these industries in a way that no government will ever want to get rid of it.
Just to add one more little good news story to that, the installers here, you all have done a fantastic job of keeping installation costs down. So the average installation costs that we're seeing across the residential fleet that's applied for rebates, which should be the most expensive, is in the $275 a watt range, which is extremely low. That's pre-rebate, and lower than any other program that we run in North America. And this is a brand new program. This is nascent. Obviously, some of those installers have been doing that for a while, but we expect to see that cost come down even further and faster. So there's a good news story here that it very well could be that in 3 years you guys have brought the cost down to the point where you can still viably survive as an industry. Maybe not all the way, but you should be proud of where you're at now.
Well, actually, this is going to be my comment almost exactly. We worked in work across Canada, and programs like the one in Ontario built an industry. It built a skill set that wasn't there. And that gets brought to the consumers who now, have a choice. They can deal with their, power issues with conservation-free solar on the roof. So I'd just like to applaud the Alberta programs because you are building skills. You are, Jeff's got trucks, he's got people, and they've been trained and they're honed on the job, and that's how they can do things for 275 a watt. And I just hope there's a future beyond 2 years, 3 years. It depends on the electrical rate structure and how that's interfacing, and we're gradually everywhere else in the globe is phasing out subsidies because the cost competitiveness of the landed cost of solar roof is cheaper than utility. Alberta's got particularly low pricing, but the rest of Canada has got more realistic costs that make solar cost effective now. It just needs companies to ring the doorbell and say, hey, you should do this, which they need to make money. So, anyway, thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to take a question on the webinar now. What are the financial benefits of a business or homeowner installing solar?
So I can specifically speak to our program is that we offset the initial cost of the solar by 75 cents per watt with limits that were described earlier. And certainly all of our systems are under the Alberta microgen regulation. And I don't want to get too deep into that, but essentially that's offsetting the cost of electricity that you're using in your home. So your costs will vary depending on what your electric costs are at your home and any distribution charges that are charged by your utility. We get this question quite a bit, and really the answer is call a solar installer or 2 or 3 and have them come out and do an analysis for you. That's what they do. It's what you all do here in the room, and they're happy to tell you exactly how much it is.
Okay. Another one from the webinar here. Has there been primarily residential or primarily commercial installations since the residential and commercial solar program started this summer?
The uptake has been higher on the residential side in numbers, as you would expect, but even more robust than we expected. So the commercial systems are a little more lumpy. So we get a whole bunch of 7 kilowatt systems every week, and the residential side, that's a very steady flow that is increasing every week. So that uptake's much easier to predict. We have 450 kilowatt systems that are coming online shortly, but are online right now. So it'll look like we don't have a lot of commercial today, and it might be in 2 weeks that all of a sudden we have a couple of very large 400 kilowatt plus systems. That's very large. So at this early stage of the program, it's hard to say where the commercial side sits. We do know several large commercial projects that are either complete and just finishing up their connection approvals, or they're in the early stages of building, but they're definitely going to be built. So the commercial's definitely taken off, but it's some of you alluded to. It takes time to market it as well. It takes time to build kilowatt systems, so it's not going to happen overnight.
Hi, just wanted to ask a question about, kind of related to the Energy Efficiency Alberta business non-profit and institution program that was done. I think that was very successful. I work in electrical contracting, and everybody in the industry is interested in LED lighting right across the board in this city about LED retrofits. The publicity that it received made a big difference. I'm just wondering whether there's plans to do that for solar, because I've recently trained in solar design and trying to get business in solar, but I'm not hearing the same things that I'm hearing about LED. So is there some push to advertise more or educate homeowners like you did with the light bulb program, et cetera, et cetera? Thank you.
I think it's a great question. I think they're very different markets, and I'm not sure if you're talking about the change out program. That's by definition targeted to the homeowners, and it's pretty easy to incentivize someone to get a light change out for free, as opposed to plopping down many tens of thousands of dollars for a solar system. The tack that we've taken with solar so far is to work through the installer base to provide you the tools to be able to sell, rather than for us to reach out to consumers in a marketing campaign, which is much less efficient. as I've said numerous times, and I'll say again, we're open to feedback, and so if you have specific ideas that you think would work better, then we share those.
Well, it's just that I noticed as an electrician, there's suddenly a huge demand for LED retrofits in commercial businesses, and certainly any homeowners that you talk to are asking about light bulbs and saying that they went out and bought LED equipment. And I just wonder whether the same can be done for solar as well, because I think it was the publicity it received to the residential homeowners and commercial business people. They went looking for LED, and I think perhaps you need to be allowed to go with solar.
There's definitely a big network effect, which you spoke about earlier at the beginning, that we're hoping to see as well as people. I think that a lot of what drove that program is people saw their neighbors got the retrofits and then they realized that they could do it as well. And so we're hoping to see that with solar, but definitely point well taken. And we have a program review tomorrow, in fact, and we will be discussing that exact thing. So, thanks.
Excellent. So a question on the webinar, what is the average cost of a solar PV system in a typical house in Calgary? So equipment and installation, total system costs.
It's, again, really hard to answer that question. I can tell you that the average cost per watt for a system is around $275. The cost can vary pretty dramatically depending on what the setup is for your home. So that you can't take that to the bank. If you have a very difficult home to work with, it might be more expensive. If you have a ground mount system that's larger, then it might be cheaper. That is the average. The average system size that we're seeing is approximately 7 kilowatts. So if you multiply 7 kilowatts by that 275 a watt, that'll give you the average cost of the system. But again, the size, that distribution curve varies greatly. Some people have a 3 kilowatt system, and that helps them do all their access their entire home. Then they get an electric car, and now they might need a 10 kilowatt system. So it varies so widely that the advice that we have to give you is have a solar installer come to your home and let you know exactly what the cost will be, what the benefit will be. It's really a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, Jeff?
Wondering if you could comment why Alberta installers are able to install solar for cheaper than anywhere else in North America. Is that actually a reasonable thing that we're able to do that? What do you think the factors are? You work in lots of different areas. The second question, if I could as well, is you talked about maybe a finite life for the solar installers with the other trades swinging into the solar field. Is that something you've seen over and over in multiple different jurisdictions as well? Thanks.
So the cost is a mystery that people in the United States are very concerned about. So we go to events in the U.S. and the question is asked, why are they able to do solar for so much less than Canada and in Europe? And so I'm not sure whether there's definitely a labor cost issue compared to a state like New Jersey that's difficult to do business in, and it's easy to do business in Calgary. And I'm not sure what the secret sauce is. You can tell me, then I'll bring it back. Maybe we can be more efficient. So I'm not sure the answer, and I think you're probably edging also towards, are the prop markets so thin that that's what's causing it. And you'd have to tell us if that's the case. On your second question, what we've seen in most jurisdictions is that you have your initial solar installers who have been in the industry for years, slogging it out without any incentives. They're well prepared to become the leading solar companies when these incentives come, and so that's what they mostly become. The well-run companies become the leading solar companies, and that's what they do for a living. That's their business. And then you have, so they're the center of the bell curve of the installation, and then you have a pretty long tail of other companies that maintain their electrician's business or the HVAC business or the roofing business, but they have the opportunity to sell 7 or 10 or 12 solar systems a year, and they do that. And so because they're in the customer's home, they can make a sale. They're doing the roof. Oh, since you're doing the roof, then why don't we talk about doing solar at the same time? It makes sense to do these things at the same time. So the industry becomes very broad. But I would say that we do usually see whoever the incumbent solar providers that are there already, they're the ones that you have the first mover advantage. So it's hard to compete against that unless you come in with some kind of Silicon Valley, solar city startup, which you can all hope doesn't happen.
Okay, well, that's great, thanks. I guess I would my thought might be, the thing that I see when I look at the states, because I'm always comparing our costs to see why and wondering why we land so low, is I personally don't think the industry in Alberta takes into account the true cost of acquisition. So, you know, you look at in the States and they're up at 40 cents a watt on acquisition, right? There's no way you build 40 cents a watt acquisition into a 2-cent system, just a thought.
So yeah, that's absolutely true. I can tell you Solar City is a public company, so they actually publish those numbers. And so that's probably what I've heard, the 40 cents a watt number, and it's appallingly high, the cost of customer acquisition. So again, though, if you're good at what you do and you're in the community, then you may be able to have a much lower cost of acquisition. They're sending canvassers out to go door to door to every house in every neighborhood in the city the size of Calgary. That's really expensive to do. You may eventually get to the point where that's what you need to do to continue your insane growth rate that your venture capital backers require of you. But if that's not what you're required to do, then you might not have to do that. Your acquisition cost might be much lower as a result.
And when you guys talk about acquisition, that's the cost of bringing in new customers, right?
That's right.
Make sure everybody knows what you're talking about.
Okay, it's 8:55. We have time for one more question here.
So we want to wrap it up with, you have about 60 or 70 passionate solar advocates in the room. If you could have everybody here do one thing to help advance your program here in Alberta, what might that be?
For us, it's getting feedback from you because it's a new program and it's only 4 months old. Like I said, we're doing our first kind of mid-year review tomorrow with Energy Efficiency Alberta. So that's what we're really looking for. We held stakeholder meetings with you initially, but as Jesse mentioned, the program was rolled out in pretty record time. So we're not laboring under the illusion that we launched a perfect program back 4 months ago that can't be improved. So that's what we really need from you, that only you can provide to us. We got to get forward from that without you guys.
I would say to tell the solar success stories. Like I said, a lot of people I've talked to, they just don't, they have hesitations. They don't understand a lot about it. They question what could go wrong. But if you have a system that works really well and you've seen the economic and environmental benefits of it, just tell that to the people you talk to. I think it spreads that way.
Post it on Facebook, tweet. We have a couple lingering questions here that we'll potentially be able to answer really quickly. Are you allowed to do door-to-door sales for residential solar? So door-to-door energy sales are not allowed in Alberta. When you can booth it if it's for residential solar because it's a product. I'd have to double check with the Service Alberta regulation for that. So bear with us. And the other question was double dipping in multiple programs. So provincially, you can only choose one stream. The single market that applies to you. So residential or agricultural. But you can stack different levels of government. So if your municipality has a municipal solar program, you can pair that with a provincial solar program. So it is 8:58. Yes.
One gentleman up here has had his hand up and down for a while.
Oh, sure, yes.
He was disappointed when we said that.
Thanks. My question goes towards, I know solar panels is still fairly new, like the last 10, 15 years or so. And I was wondering if there's been research towards how we're going to end up recycling these panels after this lifetime of 25, 30 years. Because if we keep adding panels to these homes, later on we're going to have this huge period of time where we're going to have a bunch of solar panels that we don't know what we're going to do with. So I was wondering if there's going to be, is there any research going towards it, or is there anything that's going to happen?
You had to ask the hardest question.
Make sure you're all still awake.
I actually don't. I've looked into that one myself. It's an excellent question. Anybody else?
Just what I've heard so far is that, like now, as of right now, there's no place where you could send in your solar panels and recycle them, but there's a lot of places that will strip them down. You know, if you take it in, they'll strip down, they'll take the aluminum out of it. So is there anything specific set up? No. Are there places that will take them and take what they can use out of them? Yes. So I mean, it's going to be a work in progress as we get to that point, but that's the most I know of.
That sounds like a business opportunity.
Excellent. Do the install and then recycle it. Longevity. So thank you so much for attending. That concludes our programming for today. So thank you for all those who joined us on the webinar, as well as all those who joined us in person on this windy little day. If you haven't signed up for a membership for Solar Energy Society of Alberta, please do. They offer great programming. The seminar series are free of cost. As well, they have more technical training courses as well. So thank you very much.
I'm wondering more about the door-to-door. Sorry, that question regarding the door-to-door sales. Like you said that the service.
Yeah, there is it bans like door-to-door energy sales, like energy contracts, or if they're trying to sell you like door-to-door like furnaces and stuff like that. So that is banned. I don't know the exact things that are included in it. It is posted on our Energy Efficiency Alberta website though, so we do link to it.
And like how do like installers, how do they generally talk to you?
You can still use door hangers. A lot of people do booths, like you can do trade shows, or you can set up a booth for one of the biggest conferences is Solar West. So a lot of people have kind of like an industry booth there. There's a lot of like, marketing stuff you can do. So one of the big things is communications and the education aspect of it. So a lot of the programs that, like I know CISA does it over the winter time.
Can I pass your name?